Welcome, everybody, to this fourth Tuesday presentation. It is a very important topic, but I just want to let you all know that here on North Mountain, the fall colors have peaked, but in my judgment, the end of the fall colors is as beautiful often as the high peak of the colors, and the deep russets and the deeper reds out there that I'm looking at out the window here are really spectacular. And so as I'm wrapping up my comments here, Kate, could you please spin the camera and let everybody look out the North Mountain windows at the wonderful world, and for those who can't be here. And then spin back. So that it's pretty bright, but so welcome to North Mountain. Welcome to North Mountain in the fall colors. And I especially want to welcome our presenter today, Dr. Ericka Harney, who's a member of our faculty and teaches one of the most potent courses in our curriculum, which is how to pay the bills, how to raise money to pay the bills. And so Ericka will be sharing with us a summary of her perspective and background. This is one of her fields of expertise. Ericka has been on our faculty, I think now for 3 years. And in her courses, she gets very high marks because everybody loves the topic, and she presents it very clearly. So Ericka, I just want to thank you for presenting. I know it's hard to put one semester into 1 hour-long presentation, and I'm sure you're not going to try, but that's what we're hoping, that by the end of this, all of us will be more skilled at the task. I just want to say about the fundraising task, one final important comment. We are doing a much better job in fundraising than we have for years. The Appalachian team is doing brilliant work. The Himalayan team is starting to make some serious engagement. The development team that is of Chris and Shannon and myself, with others helping out, is tackling the topic. But the whole university, the whole global family needs to focus on this task. One of the saddest things for me is when I get messages from alumni, and for the last 1 month, I've gotten at least 6 messages from alumni who are desperate to get funds. They're taking their master's degree training, and they're out there doing work, in some cases for 10 years. And the programs that they're working with are truly going bankrupt. So the need among our alumni for the content that Ericka is sharing right now, to my estimation, the need is rising more and more. And so this is a timely and very important presentation from Ericka. And if you have questions, if you have answers, for those of you who are linking in from around the world, please contact me directly, and I will try to put you in touch with Ericka or some other people in the Future Generations Global family to help you raise money. So with that introduction, Ericka, thank you for being part of Future Generations, and thank you for this presentation.
Sure thing. Well, thanks for having me do this. It's kind of a quick summary of the class, content-wise, kind of a little bit of what we go through for all of resource development. So I am trying to cram some highlights of the course into 1 hour that occurs over 16 weeks to give you a little bit of perspective, and certainly welcome you if you decide to take the course or if it's something that you're further interested in. But I just want to share that information. So I'm going to share my screen over here, hopefully. I don't see the right one. So there might have to be some tech help over here. I don't see the right screen that I usually present from. So I may need to share in a different way. If you all are seeing either the actual PowerPoint, or you seeing,
we have your
but
PowerPoint,
not the actual presentation mode. You're not seeing that. I don't think I have the right screen sharing and it's not popping up. So let me try one more thing, and otherwise, there we go. That should do it. Okay.
We can see it now, Ericka.
Perfect. Thank you. I do have the Q&A box open as well. So if you have a question throughout, please post that there, and I'm watching that. I'm going to stop my video as well to help some folks with bandwidth. So I just wanted to give kind of an overall view from different pieces of the course to kind of give you a little bit of a taste of what we cover. Daniel already introduced me, so I won't go too much into who I am, but and there's my contact information. But I've been doing fundraising, grant writing for over 20 years now. 34 million for some folks is a lot. Other colleagues that I have that work in government, that's pennies to them. But it has been a very wide variety of organizations that I've gotten to work with, and so I enjoy it very much. What I want to go through today is kind of, again, I mentioned overview, but hitting these specific topics of need, how you go about finding donors, and then giving you a little bit of an overview and some short points about different ways to go about fundraising, so the actual mechanisms, and then a little bit of a summary into how do you prioritize and choose which mechanisms that you're going to work through, and what does a fundraising plan look like? For some of us, it has been just okay, what is going to work today when it comes to fundraising, and hopefully this encourages you to be a little bit more strategic in how you move forward in your fundraising. But where that all starts, and where I spend actually a fair amount of time at the beginning of this semester, is identifying what your case for support, or it might be called for some folks a need statement, or what it is that donors are connecting with as to why they're going to donate to you. So that case for support has a variety of components and really lays out for a current donor, a potential donor, what is it that they're supporting? What is special about your organization? And so I'm going to give you a quick list of what should go into that, whether it's an actual document, it's a presentation, it's a formal like brochure. That's kind of totally up to you and what is appropriate for the donors that you're working with. But it really should summarize your organization in the best way possible, so that let's just look at potential donors, have a very quick understanding as soon as they look through your case and understand your organization. What is it that you do, and what is it that you accomplish, and how is that work important? And so it brings you and the donor to the same page as to what you all are accomplishing. What is your goal? Who are you serving? And why does it matter? And within that, you have to kind of think of it as a quote sales document. And in that you are selling the mission of your organization to a particular donor so that they invest in your organization. They're investing in the mission and the work. Financially, sometimes that's also with their connections. Sometimes that's also with their own talent, if they serve as a volunteer or on the board. But you really do have to think of it as a sales document to reach a donor in a different way that convinces or persuades that donor to write you a check, give you a donation, participate in your mission. But there also has to be communication in a way that relates to potential donors in two different ways. Some people are very numbers focused. If you want to think of it in a rational argument, or need a very prescribed structure, and they want to see statistics, they want to see the data, they want to know how many people you served, how many pounds of food you distributed, how many vaccinations you gave that month, versus the more emotional, the stories. I think of it, if you want to think of it as quantitative versus qualitative, you can certainly think of it that way. But what are the emotional stories, the impact, someone increasing or even developing literacy skills, being able to graduate from primary school or university, what kind of impact has that had on that person's life? So you can juxtapose the difference between the two of, I give numbers and I highlight success stories. I give the impact through the eyes of the people that are experiencing my organization and the services that I provide. But it also drives a sense of urgency. Like, this is a problem right now. This has to be solved right now. And if we don't do it, here's what happens in the future. I think we're seeing that with with climate change and the sense of urgency, even though we've had individual scientists telling us as a public, hey, this is going to be a problem. And now we're living through some of that. But we're also seeing the urgency. Folks are actually experiencing the kind of consequences, if you will. And so your case has to do the same thing. It has to drive urgency. This has to be fixed right now. And you can use it not just for fundraising. You can use it for general marketing. You can use it to promote your organization to elected officials. There's lots of different ways that this can be employed, not just for fundraising. So think of it as kind of a multitask, multi-tool that you can use across your organization, and it doesn't have just one purpose. And then last but not least, it gives a great perspective of the whole organization. So this thing, you feel like it has to be, 20 pages, and it really shouldn't be. At most, you're usually thinking about 4 pages. I've seen some very long ones, and donors get lost. Something that's too short, they don't have a good idea of what's really happening. Like a 1-pager, leave a 1-pager for an infographic that serves as a impact report at the end of the year. But a needs statement around 2 to 4 pages is great. Longer, if it needs to be longer, great. You determine that, but it really needs to be succinct. So we take that case for support and we introduce it to our audience. Now we have to figure out who that is. So spend some time as you're thinking through a fund development plan. Who are our audience members? So not just the individual donors, but who do they work for? What companies or organizations, government officials need to know this information, and maybe there's different ways to pull that in. But all of that, as you're thinking through the stories and introducing your organization, you think about who needs to hear this. In short, make it dynamic. Give us some great headlines, grab our attention, actually show us how you've changed lives, changed the community for the better, how you've brought in, if we want to go back to seed scale, how you've brought in folks from the top down, bottom up, outside in to make that change. And we're not only going to pull from the need statement when we're meeting with potential donors and different members of our audience, but we're going to show them how things are done and make transitions. So when I mentioned the case for support, you can pull from that individual parts and pieces as well. I saw a really great, and this was a little bit longer, but it had multiple purposes, where an organization made their need statement an entire folder, and it had different parts and pieces per audience that it slid in and said, here we go. These are the key points that this kind of audience needs to see. And so they picked and chose what was appropriate. So that might be another way to look at how do we use our case for support, and how do we drive home that point by making transitions from need to our programs. How do we make those connections? But describing who you are. Now, yes, a donor is investing in your organization, but the real key piece of what they're doing is investing in the method of which you tackle an issue. So who you are is kind of secondary to who you serve. You might be the best organization that does this work and the best organization to invest in, but that's secondary. So highlight the programs that you have, but make it very brief about who you are. Hit the highlights. Yes, it might be important to know that you have decades of experience in this work, but giving a full kind of history of all of it isn't always necessary. Hit the high points, what was most important, keep it brief, and highlight what is necessary. When it comes to that qualitative part in your need statement, When you look at success stories, don't focus so much on what brought somebody to your organization, but how did they change? How are they impacted by your organization? And I mentioned balancing statistics and stories, and take pictures where it's appropriate. Sometimes our culture doesn't allow for that, but where it is appropriate, sometimes there's not faces with that. We have to take things from behind, but certainly use pictures where it's appropriate. But what you're trying to drive home is the need of your organization and who you're serving. So clearly outline, when I say your organization's need, how much do I need and what is it for? I need to purchase hygiene products. I need to pay for rent. We need a new building as part of our school. What does that look like? I have defined needs so that a donor isn't then following up with and asking, well, what do you need money for? A donor should be very clear about, okay, I have these needs and this is how much it costs. Be right up front with what I need. And that doesn't mean they're going to give you a donation for the full amount. It may be parts and pieces, or maybe they donate an actual item. Tell us what a donation would go towards, and tell us your goal, and tell us how much you're going to need to get there and how somebody can contribute. Is it money? Is it like straight out cash? Is it something that's a planned gift, which we'll kind of get to a little bit? But also think about targeted asks in a way that doesn't overwhelm, but show us the impact as well. And maybe there's a follow-up, a nice thank you letter to say, of course, we got to steward these gifts, to say, this is what impact you made. So we're going to switch over to how we identify these people. Who are these people out there that we need to rely on for investing in our mission? So when we look at who gives, when we got to figure out who our donors are, maybe you already have current donors and those are great. That serves as a foundation with who might we add? What are the key demographics? What is it about our current donors that makes them special to our mission, and who might be the next extension of that? So identifying those donors is based off a lot of information, and finding out additional information about our current donors. What kind of history? Why do they give? Ask them why they give and how they came to your organization. You can also screen donors, if you will. I'm going to show you a list of what kind of information that might include, some of it appropriate for your organization, sometimes it's not. But when we do prospect research, we're looking at individuals as well as, say, foundations, corporations, government entities. So we're looking at both here, but what we are going to do for each one, or maybe there's a group that we're identifying, we're going to create a profile. I'm going to give you a tool to do that and show you in just a moment. But I'm going to create a profile of who they are and what kind of interesting aspects do I know about those folks that would be appealing for them as a donor for our organization. So when we look at individuals, here's some key information that we're looking for. Now, this is not always for every organization, but it gives you kind of a key basic of what we might be looking for. So basic demographics, who, like personal information, family information, are they giving to any other organization? So this is getting into digging for information. So you need to determine what capacity do we have for gathering this information. I might be looking at other organizations' websites, asking around if there's nothing public or published, like an annual report. Are they already volunteering? So not only are they giving of money, but they're also giving of time. So are they participating as a board member? Are they working with other organizations? Then also, what do they do professionally? Is there something that, so let's say a physician, a doctor, is there something special or a particular population that that person is working with that might be of something of importance to your organization? You want to get more involved in health organizations, and this person might be able to guide you in that way. Then for some of us, this might be important. Other organizations, maybe not so much, but are they giving to specific political campaigns or perspectives? Maybe that's important, maybe it's not, but if it's something that aligns with your mission, certainly look for that kind of giving. And then last but not least, what does their network look like? Are there connections that they have, or folks that you can ask about their connections? If there's, say, news stories, social media coverage, any sort of business registration, if you know further information about a business that this person owns and what kind of work that they're doing, what kind of interest that they have. So all of those are kind of information that we're gathering. And I'm going to switch to foundations and governments in a moment. But Valerie had a question. If you're a new nonprofit and don't have donors yet or outcomes from programs within the nonprofit yet, how do you get started with fundraising when donors are requiring other income sources and past program outcomes? So when you're brand new, look at and share the history of why that organization exists. There's a reason why someone develops or creates a community organization or a nonprofit organization, non-government organization. So what is the need that it's based off of? So yes, you can share the mission. Maybe you don't have the outcomes that you've achieved yet, but what are the outcomes that you are looking forward to in the coming years? I think one great tool, which I'm going to show you examples of and provide other resources for, is a whole logic model. So if I don't have any history, I can at least show you where I'm going. And I can say, this is our strategic plan. This is where our board is moving to. So you're having to build a little bit of trust even harder, right? Like, this is still an effort for folks to not only see what is possible, but see the potential and see how impactful your mission could be if you had the investment. And I think that's the different sell here is, we can't make this happen unless you're involved. And so our organization isn't going to meet the outcomes that we know are important without your investment. Getting donors at this point is really more so grassroots and folks that know your board and know your staff and see the passion within those individuals. And that's why they give. They're not necessarily giving because of the outcomes you have achieved yet, but what is it that you hope to achieve? So still building a donor base, but still very much the same prospect research methods here when it comes to individuals. When it comes to foundations and government, and if there's a follow-up question there, Valerie, let me know. Very kind of similar in terms of where I start. I want some basic contact information. What is this foundation or government entity interested in? Is it a good match for what I'm doing? As soon as I am not a good match for their interest, if I see that they're not giving in the areas that I'm doing work, I put them in my no pile for now, and I move on to the next. Your time is precious and you only have so much of it, so you need to use it wisely. If I'm not eligible, I'm not going to apply. If I'm not someone that they give money to in terms of the type of organization or type of mission, then I also put them in my no pile and I move on. And then I also make note of their deadlines. I put it on my calendar. I get my team involved and say, okay, what do we need to put together before the 15th of 2 months from now? And then I also look at, who are they giving to? If I can find this information, who are they giving to now and how much? So who helps me determine what their interests are? How much helps me determine how much should I ask for? So if they're giving in like millions kind of range, 7 digits, or are they giving around 500, 3 to 1,000 kind of range there? So I look at their past awards because that helps me to determine my ask. So I've got 2 templates for you that we're going to share. 2 different worksheets for doing this research and filling in as you get this information. I give these to the students in the course as they develop, and it's part of their lab assignments to do some prospect research, gather information about individual donors and potential funding organizations. So we're going to give you those templates for organizing your prospect research for your organization. So I'm going to go on to the next topic of, okay, I have my need. I'm very clear about what we have to raise money for. I find the people that are going to make that investment. Let's look at how we ask them. So when I say fundraising mechanisms, I mean these things. And the course goes goes further into depth about each of these and a little bit more than these 5. But these are your major kind of funding mechanisms for which we are fundraising. So let's look first at that annual giving. And that's typically what we say smaller, somewhere, depending on your organization, small may be like $10. It might be thousands. So it just depends, of course. When we say small, that is very relative, but it's a series of asks. It's very targeted asks throughout the year, not just a one-time thing, not just towards the end of the year, but a very kind of series of asks I'm asking multiple times. I might ask someone 3 times before they give me a donation. And what I'm hoping for from annual giving, the repeated asks, the consistent communication with donors and potential donors, is that they're giving me money that I can use to pay for whatever I need. Is that keeping the lights on? Is that buying materials? Is that providing housing? Like, I can use that for whatever I need to. As soon as donors start restricting their gift, it makes it harder for me to track what it's supposed to be used for. And then that's even more on my finance people, whether they're staff or volunteers, and paying for what is restricted. So I'm hoping for and want unrestricted dollars that can go towards any need that I have. So whenever I make a donation personally, I just say general fund, use it for whatever you need. I trust you as an organization to know exactly what you need to spend money on. So what you find from a lot of folks is this is their opportunity to make at least 1 gift a year. And that's what we're hoping for, that they at a minimum give once. Maybe they're giving multiple times around holidays or certain celebrations, maybe their own birthday if that's something they celebrate. So we're hoping for year-over-year donations from these folks that are consistent. But it's also a time to reach out to new donors. Figure out who those people are when you're doing that prospect research. Who are the folks that we have never talked to, that we've never made an ask of, that we need to pull into our organization because we think that they would have interest. So this is a time to build upon, kind of to Valerie's question, this is the root of getting started with a new NGO. To say, okay, who are our potential donors and how do we engage them? And this can take many different forms. This can be an online form and whatnot. So I'm going to get to some of that of how we make those solicitations, what are the individual tools that we use. But annual giving is the place that we start. And when we look at annual giving, we have 3 different levels. So again, this is all relative. But there we go. So I say, quote, lower levels. So your smaller donations in the amount, but they make up a good chunk, the number of gifts that you have. So when I have, say, 100 gifts, 60 to 70 of them are at this, quote, lower level, and they're smaller gifts. For like one organization that I work with, that's typically up to $250. It's a US based organization. Those are gifts under $250. Then I get to the mid-level of my donors, which they're giving about 10 or 20% of the total gifts. So around 20 gifts, if we're looking at 100 here, and make up between 15 and 25% of the total funds that I raise. So for my one organization, that's between $250 and $1,000. And then what we have is also what we consider large gifts or major gifts, not planned gifts. That's totally different. But I'm looking at an annual gift that is larger in the like an actual amount. So this may make up 60% of all that I've raised, but maybe it's only 10 gifts out of that 100. So for this organization I work with, that's $1,000 or more. So again, this is all relative as to what makes up a lower level gift versus what makes a major gift or a large gift. And these will fluctuate as your organization grows. These are going to change, hopefully for the bigger, but it's just going to depend on a lot of things, a lot of factors, and what kind of dollars do people have that they're able to contribute. So as we see markets change, as we see income levels change, employment change, these are going to fluctuate, but overall, this is kind of the general math. It's just a matter of how much that is for your organization. Very much depends on who you are, how long you've been around, and how much fundraising efforts you take a part of. So I stress this level of giving because it is very important. It builds a base for your future. It makes your mission possible at the very foundational level and gets you going. So it's something that's very important in that it brings people in the door. It makes that future fundraising possible. You can't get planned gifts or major gifts if you don't have a foundation of people who are giving 20, 50 pounds at a time. So it certainly is what makes bigger gifts down the line possible. It also builds recognition of your organization. It gets more people in the door, and thus they're sharing about your organization and sharing your mission. And then in addition to that, we get to know people. We get to have conversations. Maybe we have someone who decided to give us $10 each month over a year. Well, I might go and have a quick meeting with that person, sit down for just a cup of coffee real quick and ask them more about themselves and how they learned about your organization. That's a learning moment for you to say, well, I'll try that again with some other people. But it also gives me the opportunity to try out new strategies. Once I have a few years of annual giving underneath my belt, maybe I do cold asks. I pull addresses of individuals that may have never heard of my organization, but live in my city, in my township, wherever I might be located, and try something new once I have a base of individuals to understand. And when I say learn about donors, that gives you an opportunity to understand who potential donors might be and what kind of facets of an individual's personality, interests, background makes them a good donor, and to move from there. And so kind of getting into that, it gives me an opportunity to keep donors. Once I have them, I want to keep them. I want to keep them engaged. So maybe I have a scheme or strategy or plan that once a donor is in the door, how do I keep them? What's the communication look like to my current donors? Do we send emails? Do we meet with them? Do we take certain ones to lunch? Do we invite them to a community event? How do I keep them involved? Not just a one-time ask and going back to them asking for a donation when they haven't heard from me all year. And it brings new supporters to the table. That's what we're really looking for, expanding that fundraising base and the foundation from which we grow our mission. So there's a lot of different ways. This is a lot, I know, but this is the foundation of a lot of fundraising. And if this kind of level of giving isn't achieved, it makes other pieces more difficult potentially. So we're going to do this in a variety of ways, and it's all going to depend on where you're located and what works for your donors. I still have a lot of folks who want an actual mailed piece in their mailbox that comes to them addressed. They want that printed piece. They want to see pictures. They want to hear from me on a consistent basis. But then other folks are very much comfortable with, I just want to give online and I want to get an email and I respond by clicking in my email, going online, donating, and I'm done. So be cognizant of how people want their information, and even ask them, how do you like to be communicated with? And some people don't have email addresses, don't have access to email, or don't want email. So ask them how they want to be reached. There's plenty of other ways to go about this as well. And I'm going to bring up crowdfunding in just a moment, but maybe I'm doing that through a social media platform. Maybe I'm doing that through a text to give when folks are doing everything in their life on their cell phone, because that's the way they have access to the world. Then I'm going to make it easier to give by using my phone rather than rely on having access to a computer and consistent internet. So I'm going to go where people are. And that may be social media, that might be on their phone. They might be getting phone calls from me where I sit down with a list, or I have volunteers call, or I have my board call. Who might be the best to connect with that individual to say, hey, we're in the middle of an annual campaign. Here's our goal. This is what we're going to do. And we really welcome your participation and want you to be involved. You're important to our organization. And we hope that you're going to make a further investment in our mission and our programs and who we're trying to serve. Done. But I'm giving that story through all of these mechanisms. This is not all inclusive. These are just the most popular ones that we still see in annual giving, even decades into the fundraising practice. People still want mailed pieces. And what we found in fundraising during COVID is more and more people actually wanted mail as opposed to an email. They were tired of looking at screens. They're tired of looking at cell phones. They're like, I just want something in the mail. It was really nice. We're hoping that trend continues, actually. But just a quick list of best practices when you're doing fundraising. Set a goal that's realistic. Yes, a little bit of a challenge. Push your board, push your volunteers, push your staff to reach a goal. So maybe a stretch, but something that's realistic. Don't set it too low and you're done in a month when it was supposed to be a 6-month campaign, but really think through, okay, how much do we need? How much do we need to raise? And then I'm going to steward those gifts. So what that means is I'm going to thank and thank again and thank again and thank again and do that some more. And I'm going to build a relationship that goes beyond just receiving a contribution. But I should also be flexible. Donors are, once you've met one donor, you've only met one donor. They're all different. They give for different reasons, and you should know who they are. So that also means your organization has to be a little flexible, but understand your capacity. Know how much time you're able to dedicate to fundraising when you're also doing programs, you're also doing outreach, you're also training volunteers. So be flexible, but know your capacity, but also be very organized. Be very intentional. Pick which mechanisms are going to work for you, not ones that are a chore. And above all, grow your goal each year. You might have, based on market situations and economics where you're located, where you might have to have a stagnant goal, but other times you are able to increase that by 5%, 10%. Don't go over above and beyond what's realistic, but certainly think about, what does this look like next year? What's our goal? So I put together a few links when we send you these slides as well. Several links that are great that I like, that I share with the class when it comes to annual giving. So one mechanism that of course has gained popularity over, the last 10, 15 years is crowdfunding. It's peer-to-peer fundraising. It is a quick way of giving online, whether that's through social media or some other platform. I've got a link in here to a lot of different platforms. You can pick one over the other. There's plenty of options, but it allows somebody to read a very quick message, choose to give, push a button, donate, be done. So very quick online giving during a specific campaign. So over a week, over a month, whatever that might look like. But it gets folks to immediately engage rather than courting them, if you will, over time. So they see a quick story, they read about you for a couple of minutes, something like that, or someone shares about your organization, click, donate, done. Most of what we're talking about here with NGOs and nonprofits is using crowdfunding to donate, right? It is a donation. There is, for some folks, and depending on your country, a tax benefit, but other than that, people are giving money and not expecting anything in return. Other forms of things that you can use crowdfunding are things like reward, debt, and equity. So people who give money through crowdfunding to invest. That's not what we're talking about here. We're using an online platform to make a contribution. But above all, what it's doing is making giving easy. When we limit the amount of time folks have to delve into our mission, it takes more time, and thus can, people get distracted very easily. If I send an email to someone, they've got an email before it, they've got an email after, and they've got a whole list in their inbox. I want a mechanism where people don't get distracted and walk away. As soon as they walk away from an email, they walk away from a Facebook post, I've lost their attention. Crowdfunding makes it very quick. Our attention spans are very short these days, and gets an immediate click, and makes that giving very, very easy. So I've put together a few more links specific to crowdfunding. Whether that's for earned income, that's for making a straight donation, however you want to get people involved very quickly. These are great links to see what platforms can I choose from? How do they work? Are there samples that they can give me? So start with these links, but hopefully that gives you kind of a perspective of crowdfunding. It's not an overnight thing too. It also has to be very strategic, and something that you include in your fundraising plan on purpose. So we go from very simple, very quick, very attention grabbing and moving on, to something that is much more longer term. So when we look at grants, those are not always the funding mechanism that is fit for everyone. Okay, grants fit for a lot of organizations, and they don't fit for many organizations as well. So when we look at what grants are, I send an application, a letter, full application, depends on the funder, to them. So a foundation, sometimes corporation and their corporate giving, sometimes the government, it just depends. But a grant is money that you receive and you don't pay it back. All right, so grants, very similar to a donation. Unless something goes awry, you get money. Sometimes that's on reimbursement. So you have money, you spend it, you send in receipts, and you get that money back. But it is money that you do not pay back. You get the grant, do the work, send in reports, done. The biggest key in terms of grants and doing some research, so use that prospect template that you're going to get to do this with foundations and government funders and the like, is finding the good fit. So just like individuals, I'm going to put down anything that's not a good fit. So just because a board member has mentioned a foundation doesn't mean that it's the best fit for me. But folks get sometimes overwhelmed by the prospect of grants. They're not sure what to expect, and it seems complicated. So I'm going to break this down into 4 main components. These are the basics of a grant application. You've already got your need statement and your case for support. So simply what I'm doing is I'm defining need. So what's the definition of food insecurity? What's the definition of being unhoused or homeless? What's that definition? I'm going to describe how it impacts my community. So when I have, we can take COVID even, what does a pandemic look like? How is it affecting my community? And what do these numbers look like? How many people are in the hospital? How many people do get vaccinated? So I'm going to define what the problem is. I'm going to describe how it affects me and my community, and then I'm going to give you some data. So define the need. So that's very outside my organization. That's very objective, right? I'm looking at it and it is kind of just fact. This is what it is, right? Here's the problem. Then how I subjectively address that need is through my goals. What do I have to accomplish to address the need? So if I'm trying to address hunger, I'm trying to address food insecurity, my goal is for someone to no longer be food insecure. Well, I've gone back in my need and defined food insecurity as someone who does not know where their next meal is coming from. My goal is to provide food for those who need it so they know where their next meal is coming from. Boom, that's my goal. Now it's going to be a little bit more complicated, how many, where they are, but what does my goal look like and when am I going to achieve that goal? So yes, it gets a little bit more substantial than that, but at its core, at its basics, how am I addressing the need? And then my goal is then accomplished by doing things. So it's one thing for me to say, I'm going to provide meals so that people know where their next meal is coming from. Well, how do I do that? I get donations of food. I purchase food. We put together meals. We figure out a way to distribute those. We work with community agencies to identify people who need a meal. And I get referrals. I get people to come to a location. I have maybe part of my grant is to purchase a vehicle to go and deliver meals to maybe people that are homebound or are located outside of my community, have transportation, don't have access to transportation to come to me. I bring it to them so that we make sure that they're served. But how do I accomplish my goal? My programs and my services. And then finally, and this links back to another course offered by Future Generations, is how do I evaluate? It's one thing for me to provide meals, and then I measure that outcome and I measure that output. So I can say I provide meals. Okay, in the last year, how many did I provide? How many people then are not as food insecure? Or how many people have had access to consistent sources of food and therefore have found ways to sustain their food access? Maybe we're working with other community organizations that build upon immediate food provision. So that's an outcome of my organization. So outputs are things like numbers. How many people come? How many people participate maybe in a cooking class? How many people donate food? Whereas outcomes are things like, what was the impact of having consistent meals? Do I have kids who are learning more, doing better in school? Do I have adults that are doing better at work, are feeling better about their future even? That's something you can measure. You can ask for stories. So this is at its core what grants and grant applications are doing and include. I mentioned, so I know that's a lot, but let's not make it complicated. I say what my need is. What is my goal to address that need? How am I reaching my goal? How do I know I accomplished my goal? So I'm going to throw a little bit of a complicated graphic at you. Sorry, there's a line right through it. I am a firm believer in logic models, and we can give you a template that'll come with the slides as well. There's a lot more to this than I can fit in an hour, let alone maybe a couple of minutes here. I can spend hours on logic models. It is my favorite tool because it helps me see how I accomplish outcomes. This is how I develop a program. So when I have something called an input, it's something we invest. So people, money, time, my facilities. Let's say I am distributing food. I actually have food. I have research. I know what the statistics are. And so I bring in things, inputs, and I do things with the stuff I have. So if I'm trying to teach people how to grow vegetables, on the input side, I have materials for them to look at and to take home. Maybe I give them soil, seeds, a container. With the outputs then, I provide education. I show them how to plant these things. Maybe once they go home and start planting things in a garden, in their yard, in land that they have access to, I go visit and I go check on them. I provide updated training. Hey, maybe once they grow certain vegetables, they need to know how to cook those vegetables. So I provide that kind of training. But I also look at, who am I reaching? Am I working with adults, children, certain parts of my community, folks that need to learn certain skills? Okay, so I have stuff, inputs, I do things with the stuff, and then I accomplish my outcomes. So when I teach somebody how to grow a carrot, they know how to grow that carrot and they now have a skill. Maybe they've not only changed their knowledge, but hey, I feel inspired and I want to grow other things. I want to expand to fruits. Maybe then I look at, all right, I can grow vegetables, I can grow fruit. Maybe I start looking at animals too. So I look at the short term, I learn things, I take action. So maybe medium term, sometimes you're looking at 6 months for short term, medium terms a year. People grow habits. They do things on a regular basis. They look for some community change. Maybe they are changing behavior with those habits. And then ultimately, this is growing into a condition that changes. When you start having people eat fresh fruits and vegetables, we hope for some sort of health benefit that we're looking for. So maybe there's a societal impact. This is not to say that you're going to get all of these things that are listed over in these outcomes, but what am I hoping for? What does that look like? So that's a lot in a little bit of time with logic models. So that's why on this next slide, I have a lot of stuff that you can check out when it comes to logic model. And in the course, we actually spend 2 whole weeks on looking at logic models, designing programs to address our needs. This is the do. And why I like logic models, I can see it. I'm moving through a continuum to have impact. It is my favorite tool of all time, and it makes me very happy. And I hope you are happy seeing it and looking forward to digging into it more. So another mechanism, and I am just shooting through these. So you'll get these slides and you'll have these for your reference as well. Major gifts. Okay. These build upon my donors back in annual giving. If I don't have folks making the smaller gifts, I don't have people that are making lasting, significant, large investments in my mission. These are sometimes donors that are investing large amounts of money over time. They're hoping for a legacy. A lot of them are looking for a legacy of I made this impact. Some of this may be in a planned gift. And what we mean by that is someone who leaves an end of life gift in a will, something that comes from their family members once they pass on. That sometimes our tradition in some of our cultures is when I pass on, I'm leaving this for future generations. But I'm moving donors from giving a smaller donation every year to thinking about a larger contribution. But I have to know more about this individual, and this is much more of a relationship than maybe a 50-pound contribution. So I'm moving folks along in this continuum to be further involved. There's a lot involved with that. And so I have some other resources for you, kind of an overview of major gifts, and that asking for major gifts is a small booklet that outlines a lot of aspects. So major gifts are not for everyone, but if you have a really significant donor base to build from, it certainly is something to look at and including in your fundraising plan. And then last but not least are events. And boy, did these move off the plates of organizations during COVID. They're gradually making their way back as some of us, where we're comfortable, move into groups. These have not fully made a comeback yet by any stretch of the means, but are still very popular in how we organize them. To be quite honest, this is a mechanism for fundraising that is not my favorite because they typically don't pay for themselves. You are usually expending more effort and more time and money to throw an event, but it does have benefits. People get to know you. People get to see what you're doing. People meet other donors. They get inspired by other donors. Sometimes they see it as a little bit of competition. But I've got the kinds of events here that are very popular when it comes to fundraising. Some of them appropriate for your organization. Some people just completely skip over them, but we're gradually getting back to them. There's a great link here, also a booklet about events and making them work for you. I've got just a couple of graphics here. The key thing with making a fundraising event work is getting sponsorships that pay for the event itself. So people who are purchasing tickets, that's just on the top of what I'm getting from sponsors who are typically giving big investments in my event. So all of those mechanisms, I know that was kind of a very broad overview of all the different ways, and it's not all inclusive either, but many of the most popular ways of raising money for you to make a choice. All right, which ones of these are going to work for you? Some organizations stay away from events. Some organizations stay away from crowdfunding. It's not their jam. They don't have the social media presence sometimes that it needs. Maybe they do have a wide community support and it would work great. So of all of these, you might have to pick and choose. If you only have one staff member and 20 volunteers, that's going to make a difference in which mechanisms you choose. how do you get your board involved? But prioritize these mechanisms per your capacity, per understanding and knowledge of the mechanism itself, and see which you're going to start with. Like in Valerie's instance, hey, we just need to get off the ground. Let's start with this one thing and then add to that. And so when we prioritize, when we choose those mechanisms, we start looking at an overall fundraising plan. And in the course, we finish out our semester with looking at a fundraising plan. What's our goal? How much do we need? Who's going to give? How are we going to ask them for that money? And we go. We know who's going to make the ask. We know how to get people involved, and we know the message that we're going to share. So it's very strategic. It is very outlined. Once I have a plan, I know where I'm headed, and it's not kind of what do I have time for today. I'm very strategic and intentional about who I talk to, how much I ask for, how they get to know us, how I thank them, and how I keep them involved so that they give again. So all of that to say, I come up with a plan for what works for my organization. So that gives you kind of a crazy quick highlight of the fundraising course. What we try to look at every week are each of those mechanisms. We have labs based off of prospecting, off creating a need, off of understanding what it is that we do through Logic Model that we share with our potential donors. So very quick overview. Some of my favorite things about fundraising and favorite mechanisms that I love. This is kind of an overview of what we do in 16 weeks when we delve into each of these things. So I would love to see you all next semester. This just gives you just a tiny taste of all the things that we do in this course. You can read more about the course and what we cover, which is pretty much all of this, and we just go in depth. But if you have questions too, feel free to reach out to me. Feel free to contact Chris Roper with the university, have a conversation with him about potentially coming on board with future generations, whether you're a master's student, you're a certificate student, whatever that looks like. We love to have you involved and learning this stuff even more than just giving or getting an overall perspective of what we cover in fundraising and how fun fundraising can be and how impactful it can be for accomplishing missions. So thank you all for letting me share, giving the overview, providing some information. Please do check out those links. Please do read further, grow your minds and understanding. And I hope this kind of provides more of an interesting perspective of fundraising. So a few minutes for questions. I want to be respectful of your time too.
Ericka, Daniel, first of all, thank you so much. This was a great refresher course for me, and I hope so for everybody else who's on. I do want to pick up on a point that Ericka made, which is that the links and all these tools that have been provided will be available through the slides that will be sent out. If you want them, you can ask specifically, send a message to Shannon or to any of us, and we will send you the slides and the links, but they will go out with the recording after this class. And so again, Ericka, thank you. We are at time, but we do have we will take a few minutes here in case anybody wants to jump in with a quick question.
I see a question from Jean-Marc. Best way to attract a donor to support your activity or program, even though you are a new NGO? I think the biggest thing are relationships and conversations. That might be person to person, one person at a time, but certainly getting folks to understand your mission is the first way to bring them in the door so that you can ask them to invest later. But just sharing, having that conversation, bringing that need statement and your case for support. But it is ultimately a relationship. All fundraising is some sort of relationship. And so I say the best way first, as a new organization, get to know who could be your supporters and have a good conversation with them.
I'd like to build on what Ericka said when she also earlier mentioned the word have fun. I found that I raise money only when the donor is having fun. The asking of money should be fun for the donor to receive, because if it's not fun, the donor's not going to give. And it should be fun for you to ask because of what Ericka's saying. It's about building a relationship. The donor is getting a relationship not only with you, but also with a better world. And that is fun. That's hope building. That's energy growing. And so keep the idea that this is not a burdensome task. You're doing a favor to the donor to ask them for money. If it isn't, if they don't see this as making their world better, they're not going to give, and then it's not going to be fun, and they're not going to be a repeat donor. Any other questions? Well, Ericka, we are at time. People do have other agendas here. And thank you again hugely, and from all of us here on North Mountain. And thanks also from those who've been in attendance from many different countries. I look forward to seeing everybody again in January for the fourth Tuesday presentations. We don't have a fourth Tuesday presentation, folks, in November for Thanksgiving, nor in December because of Christmas. But we will welcome you back in January for the fourth Tuesday. But until then, I hope everybody does have a wonderful fall and a good Thanksgiving and Christmas. And for those of you who are logging in from the Indian subcontinent, happy Diwali, because this is Diwali. Yesterday was Diwali, and I want to wish happy Diwali for everybody on the Indian subcontinent. Thank you very much. And again, thank you, Ericka.